Hey, you ever get that feeling there's something in the dark watching you? If you're like me, you can't look away. That's why I want to tell you about Creepy Shit. It's the podcast that dives into the strange, the haunted, the downright unholy, true crime that never got answers, folklore that refuses to die, and stories that cling to you long after you're done listening. Every week you're invited to sit by the fire with the rest of us creepers and hear something you'll want to share in a hushed voice. So if you're ready to explore things that might go bump in the night and things that don't make a sound at all, subscribe to Creepy Shit Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Join us. We've been waiting for you.
What if everything we thought we knew about human history was only a sliver of truth? Scattered rumors and obscured reports hint at towering skeletons unearthed in forgotten caves, remote deserts, and ancient burial mounds. Hidden here are anomalies that defy conventional timelines. These aren't myths or metaphors, they're bones. And their existence raises unsettling questions. Who were these beings? And why don't they fit within the history we've been taught?
Welcome to Down the Crooked Path. I'm your host, Amanda Joy. Join me as we dive into eerie and spine-chilling stories that blur the lines between reality and the unknown. From cryptids and mysterious disappearances to true crime, UFO sightings, and paranormal activity. Venture into the unknown and uncover the secrets that lie down the crooked path.
From dusty archives to hastily redacted news articles, the trail seems deliberately obscure. Could there be a grander story concealed behind academic consensus? Are these bones a threat to our understanding, or to those who profit from controlling it? As we pull back the curtain on a world where truth may be stranger than fiction, one thing becomes clear. Someone doesn't want us to dig too deep. The boundary between myth and reality blurs when confronted with evidence. Towering bones, sealed files, cryptic accounts, each one demanding reconsideration of accepted narratives. Not everything fits neatly into the history taught in classrooms. Giant skeletons stand at the crossroads, dismissed artifacts, genuine enigmas, or long-lost chapters of humanity's story. The path begins here. In the year 1900, the Omaha World Herald published a curious table comparing the reported heights of various ancient skeletons unearthed across North America. The chart included figures ranging from 7 to 9 feet tall, each attributed to different categories such as Indian, mound builder, and prehistoric. The classification reflected the popular beliefs of the time, which often separated Native American ancestry from builders of ancient earth worlds. The article did not describe specific excavations or discovery. Instead, it compiled data from earlier reports and local lore, presenting the information as part of a broader narrative about lost race of giants. These claims were common in the late 19th and early 20th century newspapers, often fueled by sensationalism and a desire to connect biblical or mythological giants to American soil. While the table itself was real and part of the World Herald's coverage, modern scholars have since debunked the notion of a separate race of prehistoric giants. Many of the skeletons cited in such reports were either misidentified remains of extinct megafauna or exaggerated accounts lacking scientific verification. Across cultures and centuries, tales of giants have loomed large, sometimes as divine warnings, sometimes as enemies of civilization, and other times as a symbolic echoes of power or pride. There is no scientific evidence supporting the existence of races of giants, but references to such things appear in historical records and mythological traditions, which can be studied objectively. The earliest biblical mention of giants comes from Genesis 6, 1-4, which describes the Nephilim as the offspring of the sons of God and the daughters of men. While interpretations vary, many scholars link sons of gods to divine beings or angels, leading the speculation that Nephilim were hybrid giants, a theme echoed in apocalyptic texts like the Book of Enoch. In Enoch, fallen angels called Watchers taught forbidden knowledge and fathered enormous children. These beings allegedly corrupted humankind, prompting the Great Flood as a divine judgment. Historically, the Nephilim narrative reflects ancient concerns about divine boundaries and moral transgressions. Early Jewish commenters and later Christian scholars debated whether the giants were literal or metaphorical. Archaeologically, no skeletons matching their description have ever been authenticated, but the myth fueled many later interpretations of giants in biblical and pseudo-depigraphical literature. Perhaps the most famous biblical giant, Goliath, appears in 1 Samuel 17, described as 6 cubits and a span tall, roughly 9 feet 9 inches. Goliath is the Philistine champion who challenges Israel's army, only to be slain by the young shepherd David with a slingshot. Later manuscripts from the Dead Sea Scrolls suggested Goliath's height may have been originally about 4 cubits or just over 6 feet tall for the time, and not otherworldly. Historically, Goliath's story may reflect military intimidation tactics or symbolic storytelling. Ancient armies often had elite fighters whose size and armor were exaggerated to emphasize their might or to dramatize their defeat. Goliath's lineage also links him to other large warriors from the region of Gath, suggesting the Philistines may have been remembered for their formidable physique, even if they weren't truly giants. In Greek mythology, the Titans were powerful deities who preceded the Olympians. Far from being simple human beings, they were cosmic beings born of Gaia, Earth, and Uranus, sky. Key Titans included Kronos, Oceanus, and Rhea. The Great War between Titans and the Olympians was later immortalized by the Hesiod theologian around 18th century BCE. While the Titans were not always depicted as giants in size, later traditions and Roman retellings emphasized their immense stature. The mythological battle represented transitions in divine rule and societal values. Historically, scholars interpret the Titans as allegorical stand-ins for pre-Hellenistic deities replaced by new beliefs. Their enormity may symbolize the immensity of natural forces, such as earthquakes, oceans, time, that the early Greeks sought to understand through narratives. Throughout oral histories of various Native American tribes, legends of enormous beings appear, not as mythical abstractions, but as accounts woven into the ancestral memory. Among the Paiute people of Nevada, one of the most discussed legends speaks of the Sidiqa, a race of giants, red-headed invaders who came into conflict with local tribes. According to the Paiute, these giants were hostile, cannibalistic, and driven into caves by concerned tribes. The culmination of this conflict in oral accounts ended with a dramatic siege. Tribal warriors reportedly lit fires at the mouth of the cave, suffocating the last of the Sidiqa inside. Other tribes across the continent echo similar stories. The Choctaw spoke of a race of giants with incredible strength who once roamed the American Southeast. The Comanche described a race of white giants who lived in the West and were eventually destroyed. And the Navajo have stories of tall, aggressive beings, often cast as symbols of chaos and disruption. Stories of giants ripple through global folklore, often reflecting the cultural values and fears and landscapes of the people who told them. In Irish mythology, Finn Mac Cumhall, the leader of the Fianna, is central to many tales. One popular account tells of him building a basalt column for the Giant's Causeway to confront the Scottish giants Bian Donner. When Finn realized the giant was far larger than expected, his wife disguised him as a baby. Fian Donner fled, imagining the father of such a child must be impossibly large. This legend is linked tightly to the dramatic geology of the region and how people explained the natural wonders through narrative. In Basque tradition, the Gentile were pre-Christian giants who are believed to have taught metalworking and megalithic buildings to humanity. Their stories are closely tied to domiciles and stone circles found across the mountainous terrain. Oral accounts say that these giants vanished with the birth of Christ, marking their end as symbols of pagan wisdom. In some versions, they hurled massive stones in protest before disappearing into the land. The Gentiles stand not merely as folklore, but as bridges between ancient customs and shifting spiritual beliefs. The Sumerians offer a distinctly different version. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, Humbaba guards the divine cedar forest, appointed by the god Enlil. Humbaba's face is described as changing expressions unpredictably, making him fearsome and strange. Gilgamesh and his companion Enkidu defeat him in a heroic quest, an act that brings divine consequences. Humbaba's role reflects the Mesopotamian views of nature as powerful and sacred, and his defeat serves as a commentary on the limits of human ambition and the risk of defying cosmic balance. Each of these giants, although culturally distinct, shares a purpose: to explain the unknown, embody ancestral forces, and personify the transition between eras or beliefs. In May 1912, the New York Times ran a headline that stirred imaginations: "Strange Skeletons Found." The article described the discovery of 18 unusually large skeletons at Lake Lawn Farm near Delavan, Wisconsin. The remains were said to measure between 7 and 9 feet tall, with skulls much larger than the heads of any race which inhabited America today. The jawbones were described as long and pointed, and the teeth were reportedly regular molars in the front of the jaw. The dig was overseen by the Balliol College and took place among effigy mounds attributed to woodland culture. The article gave the impression of a scientific excavation. Later investigations revealed that no formal measurements were recorded, and no physical evidence of the skeletons remain today. The Wisconsin Historical Society and archaeologists have since stated that the claims were exaggerated or misreported, likely fueled by sensationalism and amateur excavation practices. In Stillville, Missouri, in 1933, a report in the Stillville Ledger told of a skeleton unearthed by a teenager named Billy Harmon in Puckett's Cave. The bones were said to belong to a man over 8 feet tall. Dr. R.C. Parker, a local physician, examined the remains and estimated the individual's height based on the length of the skeleton, which was missing cartilage and a few foot bones. The skull was described as unusually small for the body, measuring only 20 inches in circumference. The skeleton was displayed in Parker's office, and locals flocked to see it. The story was picked up by the St. Louis Daily Dispatch, which added dramatic flair, speculating about the man's origins and whether he had been a chief or a victim of violence. Despite excitement, no verified scientific study followed, and the skeleton was reportedly sent to the Smithsonian Institution, where it vanished from public record. A lack of follow-up and the absence of documentation have led many to question the authenticity of the find. In Miamisburg, Ohio, the excavation of a large burial mound in 1869 was reported in the Dayton Daily News. Workers digging in a shaft from the top of the mound uncovered a skeleton in a sitting position facing east. The bones were described as unusually large, and the skull was said to be so big it could fit over a normal man's head. The article noted that the grave was covered with clay, ash, and charcoal, suggesting ceremonial burial practices. Later, reports claimed that skeletons measuring over 8 feet tall were found in the area, including one discovered in a gravel pit in 1899. The skull was described as but a shade higher than that of Pithecanthropus erectus, implying primitive origins. However, these accounts are based on secondhand information, and no physical remains have been preserved for modern analysis. Archaeologists reviewing the case have concluded that the measurements were likely exaggerated, and that the inscriptions found on nearby stones were deliberate hoaxes. On Catalina Island off the coast of California, Ralph Gilden conducted excavations between 1919 and 1928, during which he claimed to have uncovered over 800 burial sites and thousands of skeletons, including individuals measuring between 7 and 9 feet tall. Gilden described a race of fair-haired giants who once inhabited the island and displayed the remains in a macabre museum in Avalon, where the bones were used as architectural elements. Those sensational claims involved a royal burial surrounded by dozens of children's skeletons. Photographs from the time show Gilden posing with skeletons, but experts have pointed out that the images were staged to create the illusion of giant proportions. The Santa Barbara Museum of Natural History and other institutions have dismissed Gilden's claims as unsubstantiated. His methods were amateurish, and many of his artifacts were sold or lost. Today, the Catalina Island Museum acknowledges the damage Gilden did to the Native American heritage and the lack of scientific rigor in his work. But this one is the most famous and recognized story of giant skeletons of all. In the heart of Nevada's high desert, nestled near the Humboldt Sink, Lovelock Cave has long been a source of fascination, legend, and archaeological intrigue. Its dry climate and remote location has preserved thousands of artifacts, making it one of the most important sites in the Great Basin. But beyond the baskets and the duck decoys and coprolites, its stories of red-headed giants passed down through the northern Paiute oral tradition have captured the imaginations over a century. Legends tell of the Sitka, a race of cannibalistic giants with red hair who arrived in the region by raft, using the fibrous tool plant to build their vessels. These beings were said to be hostile and powerful, terrorizing the Paiute and neighboring tribes. After years of conflicts, the tribes united and drove the Sitka into a cave, where they set fires at the entrance to suffocate them. The cave, according to the Paiute, was Lovelock Cave. In 1911, miners David Foe and James Hart began excavating bat guano from the cave for fertilizer. As they dug through layers of guano, some up to 6 feet deep, they uncovered a trove of ancient artifacts. Recognizing the significance of the finds, the University of California sent Llewellyn Loud to conduct a formal excavation in 1912. Loud recovered over 10,000 items, including tools, woven baskets, fishing gears, and the now famous duck decoys made from bundles of tool reed. These decoys were later dated around 300 BCE, according to accelerator mass spectrometers, making them the oldest known in the world. Among the more curious discoveries were human remains, including mummified bodies and a 15-inch sandal showing signs of wear. Some of the mummies had reddish hair, which fueled speculations about the Sitka legend. However, researchers later concluded that the red coloration was likely the result of protein breakdown during decomposition and not evidence of a distinct race. The remains found in the cave were within normal human size range, and no skeletons matched the legendary proportions of 8 or 10 feet tall. In 1931, a local newspaper, the Nevada Review-Miner, reported the discovery of two giant skeletons in a dry lake bed near Lovelock. One was said to measure 8.5 feet, the other 10 feet, and both were reportedly mummified in a manner similar to the ancient Egyptian practices. These claims, however, were never substantiated by peer-review studies or confirmed by reputable institutions. The skeletons vanished from public record, and no physical evidence remains to verify their existence. Despite the lack of scientific confirmation, the legend persists. A boulder inside the cave bears what some claim as a giant handprint, and the 15-inch sandals continue to be cited as circumstantial evidence. Yet archaeologists caution that the large sandal did not necessarily indicate gigantic stature, and the handprint may have been a natural formation or a misinterpreted marking. Later excavations in the 1940s, 1950s, and 1960s by researchers such as Robert Heiser and Louis Knapton focused on recovering organic material for radiocarbon dating and analyzing coprolites to understand the diets of the cave's inhabitants. These studies revealed subsistence patterns centered around fish, birds, and lakeside vegetation, supporting the theory that the Lovelock people were rarely moving from their resource-rich base. The cave's archaeological records span over 4,000 years, with intense use beginning around 1000 BCE. The people who lived there, now referred to as the Lovelock culture, left behind a rich legacy of craftsmanship and adaptation. Their finely woven textiles, traps, and storage containers speak to sophisticated understanding of their environment and seasonal cycles. Thousands of miles away in Marshall County, West Virginia, the Kriap Mound offers a different kind of mystery. Excavated in 1959 by Dr. Donald Dragu of the Carnegie Museum, the site revealed over 50 burials and thousands of artifacts linked to the Adena culture. Among them was a skeleton measuring approximately 7 feet 2 inches in length. Dragu noted that the individual's long bones were unusually heavy and well-developed, suggesting a person of exceptional stature and strength. The skeleton was found in a log-covered tomb beneath the mound's base, its legs bowed to fit the confines of the pit. While some have cited this as evidence of prehistoric giants, modern archaeologists caution that field measurements can be misleading. The bones were never subjected to forensic reconstruction, and the original notes do not confirm the exact height. On the outskirts of ancient Rome, the necropolis of Phidian yields one of the most medically significant signs. In the early 20th century, the Smithsonian institution stood at the crossroads of science and speculation. Within its halls, a man named Alice Hrdlicka quietly shaped the future of American anthropology. Born in Bohemia in 1869, Hrdlicka immigrated to the States as a teenager and trained in medicine before turning his attention to the study of human remains. By 1903, he had become the first curator of the newly formed division of physical anthropology in the United States National Museum, now part of the Smithsonian. For the next 4 decades, he would build one of the largest collections of human skeletal material in the world. Hrdlicka was meticulous, methodical, and deeply skeptical of anything that didn't fit within the emerging framework of evolutionary science. He believed that all humans shared a common origin in the Old World and was a fierce critic of claims suggesting otherwise. When newspapers across the country began reporting discoveries of giant skeletons, some allegedly over 8 feet tall, Hrdlicka dismissed them as hoaxes, mismeasurements, or exaggerations. He insisted that no credible evidence supported the existence of a prehistoric race of giant North Americans. Behind closed doors, the Smithsonian's anthropology departments received numerous shipments of bones and artifacts from amateur excavators, local doctors, and regional museums. Some of these shipments reportedly included oversized skulls and long bones, yet few of these items ever made it into public displays or academic publications. critics began to whisper that the Smithsonian was suppressing evidence, hiding inconvenient finds that challenged the accepted narrative of human history. Letters and field notes from the era suggest that some specimens were quietly cataloged, others discarded, and many simply vanished from the record. Hurtelak's influence was immense. He founded the American Journal of Physical Anthropology in 1918 and helped establish the American Association of Physical Anthropologists a decade later. His views shaped museum policy, academic disclosure, and even federal investigations. When skeletons were sent to the Smithsonian from places like Steelville, Missouri, or Miamisburg, Ohio, they were often examined briefly and then disappeared into the institution's vast archives. Whether this was due to scientific rigor or institutional bias remains a point of contention. He was also a staunch proponent of eugenics, a belief system that colored his interpretations of race and human variation. His anthropometric studies focused on skull shapes, brain sizes, and physical traits, often with the goal of classifying populations by perceived evolutionary development. This perception, while common in his time, has since been discredited and criticized for its role in promoting racial hierarchies. The drama surrounding the Smithsonian intensified with the rise of alternate historians and conspiracy theories in the mid-20th century. They pointed to missing artifacts, redacted reports, and the Smithsonian's refusal to acknowledge certain finds as evidence of cover-up. Hurtelak's name became a symbol, either of scientific integrity or institutional gatekeeping, depending on who was telling the story. Today, the Smithsonian acknowledges Hurtelak's contributions while also recognizing the ethical complexities of his legacy. His papers, housed in the National Anthropological Archives, reveal a man driven by curiosity, conviction, and a desire to define the boundaries of human history. But they also hint at a deeper mystery. What was deemed unworthy of preservation, and why? In December of 2014, a satirical website called World News Daily Report published an article claiming the Supreme Court had forced the Smithsonian Institute to admit it had destroyed thousands of giant human skeletons in the early 1900s. The piece was written in the style of a legitimate news report, complete with fabricated quotes from supporting Smithsonian officials and references to a secret cover-up. It spread rapidly across social media, especially among communities that were already investigated in alternative history theories. Despite its origin as satirical, many readers took the article at face value, fueling long-standing speculations that the Smithsonian had suppressed evidence of ancient giants in North America. The fallout was swift. Fact-checking organizations like USA Today debunked the story, clarifying that the Smithsonian had never made such an admission and that the article was entirely fictional. Still, the hoax tapped into a deeper mistrust that had been simmering for decades. The Smithsonian's anthropology department, particularly during the tenure of Alex Hurtelak in the early 20th century, had been accused of dismissing or quietly shelving irregular finds that didn't fit the prevailing narrative of human evolution and migration. Hurtelak, a pioneer of physical anthropology, was known for his rigor adherence to scientific orthodoxy and his skepticism towards claims of prehistoric giants. He believed such reports stemmed from misidentification and the public's will to believe. The controversy surrounding the hoax also reignited ethical debates about the Smithsonian's handling of human remains, particularly those of Native American origins. For much of its history, the institution collected thousands of skeletons from burial mounds and archaeological sites, often without consent. Many of those remains were stored for research purposes, cataloged, and rarely returned. In response to growing pressure, Congress passed the National Museum of the American Indian Act in 1989, followed by the Native American Graves Protection and Reparation Act in 1990. These laws required federally funded institutions to inventory their collections and return remains and sacred objects to tribes upon request. Despite these legal frameworks, reparations have been slow. As of 2024, the Smithsonian still holds over 30,000 human remains, nearly half of which are Native American. A Human Remains Task Force was formed to address this backlog and recommended new policies. The report emphasized informed consent as a prerequisite for any further research or display of remains. If no descendants or tribal affiliations can be determined, the remains are to be respectfully buried. The Smithsonian has also restricted access to its human remains collection, while new ethical guidelines are finalized. The hoax, although false, served as a catalyst for renewed scrutiny. It reminded the public that behind the marble walls of America's most prestigious museum lies unresolved questions surrounding dignity, ownership, and the stories bones are allowed to tell. In the outskirts of ancient Rome, the necropolis of Phidian yielded one of the most medically significant skeletons ever found. Discovered in 1991, the remains belonged to a young man estimated to be around 6 foot 8 inches tall, towering over his 3rd century contemporaries, whose average height was closer to 5 foot 5 inches. The bones showed sign of incomplete epiphyseal fusion, indicating that the individual was still growing at the time of their death. In the bony cradle of the pituitary gland, there was revealed an enlarged and depressed area consistent with a tumor. This diagnosis pointed to giganticism, a rare endocrine disorder caused by the excessive growth of hormones. The skeleton's proportions were otherwise normal, and the burial was not marked by any signs of social exclusion, suggesting that the man may have been accepted within his community despite his unusual size. In 2017, archaeologists in Shandong Province, China, uncovered a Neolithic site in Jiaojia village that challenged assumptions about ancient human stature. Excavations revealed over 200 graves and dozens of sacrificial pits dating back to 5,000 years. Among the remains were several individuals measuring between 5 foot 11 inches and 6 foot 3 inches. Exceptionally tall for their time. One man buried in a large tomb was estimated to be 1.9 meters tall. Researchers attributed this height to a combination of genetics and nutrition. The Longshan culture, which occupied the region, practiced advanced agriculture and lived in homes with separate kitchens and bedrooms, suggesting a high standard of living. The tallest individuals were found in the most elaborate graves, implying a link between status and physical development. While not giants of modern standards, these people would have towered over their Neolithic peers, whose average height was closer to 5 foot 5 inches. In 2013, Richard J. Dewhurst published The Ancient Giants Who Ruled America, a book that quickly became a cornerstone for fringe anthropology. Drawing on hundreds of newspaper clippings, personal accounts, and historical records, Dewhurst argued that North America was once inhabited by an advanced race of giants. He claimed these beings were buried in elaborate mounds, wore copper crowns, and lived in cities with populations exceeding 100,000. Dewhurst argued that North America was once inhabited by an advanced race of giants. He claimed these beings were buried in elaborate mounds, wore copper crowns, and lived in cities with populations exceeding 100,000. According to Dewhurst, the Smithsonian Institution had systematically suppressed this evidence for over 150 years, beginning with the tenure of Major John Wesley Powell in the late 19th century. Dewhurst's narrative was compelling, filled with dramatic discoveries and shadowy disappearances. He describes giant skeletons unearthed from West Virginia, red-haired mummies in Nevada, and buried royals on the Catalina Island. The book is richly illustrated and meticulously sourced, at least in terms of volume. But the sources themselves are often drawn from local newspapers, secondhand reports, and field notes that lack peer reviews. The Smithsonian, frequently cast as the villain, is accused of confiscating remains and erasing them from historical records. Dewhurst suggests that this was done to protect the rigid evolutionary framework and to uphold the version of history that favored manifest destiny. Academic consensus tells a different story. Physical anthropologists, archaeologists, and museum curators have repeatedly stated that there is no verified skeletons of giants that have ever been recovered in North America. Measurements cited in old reports are often attributed to misidentification, exaggeration, or the absence of standardized methods. In some cases, bones thought to be human have turned out to be from large animals. The Smithsonian has acknowledged receiving many such specimens in the early 20th century, but none have matched the extraordinary claims made in French literature. Tensions between science and conspiracy deepen with the rise of digital media. Online forums and YouTube channels amplified Dewhurst's claims, often pairing them with grainy photographs and dramatic music. Meanwhile, academic institutions struggle to communicate the slow, careful nature of archaeological research. The idea of a cover-up provided more exciting than reality of carbon dating and analysis. Behind the scenes, researchers continue to examine mound sites, catalog artifacts, and publish findings in journals few outside the field will ever read. They emphasize context, stratigraph, and cultural affiliations. They have worked with Native American tribes to reparate remains and protect sacred sites. They quietly wonder how to respond to a growing wave of alternative history that blurs the line between curiosity and misinformation. Dewhurst's book remains popular, but not because it's scientifically sound, but because it taps into something deeper. The desire to believe that history holds secrets, that institutions are not always honest, that the bones beneath our feet might tell a story no textbook ever dared to print. In the quiet town of Alton, Illinois, a boy named Robert Wadlow was born in 1890. At birth, he seemed perfectly ordinary, but by the time he was 5, he stood over 5 feet tall. His growth never slowed. By the time of his death at age 22, Robert measured 8 feet and 11 inches, the tallest person ever recorded. His condition was caused by hyperplasia of the pituitary gland, which led to an abnormally high level of growth hormones. At the time of his death, doctors noticed that his body showed no signs of stopping. He wore size 37AA shoes and required custom braces to walk. A blister for one of those braces became infected, leading to complications that ultimately ended his life. His story remains one of the most well-documented cases of giganticism in medical history. Centuries earlier in 18th century Ireland, Charles Byron became a sensation in London. Known as the Irish Giant, Byron stood approximately 7 foot 7 inches tall. His skeleton, now housed at the Royal College of Surgeons in England, has been studied extensively. Genetic analysis revealed that Byron suffered from a mutation of the AIP gene, which is associated with familiarity isolation pituitary adominus. This same mutation has been found in living descendants from some of the regions in Northern Ireland, suggesting a hereditary link that spans generations. In more recent years, Tanya Angus of Las Vegas gained public attention due to her experience with acromegaly, a condition characterized by excessive growth hormone productions that develop after the closure of growth plates. Tanya grew from 5 foot 8 inches to over 7 feet tall and weighed nearly 400 pounds. Her giganticism caused by a tumor wrapped around her caudary artery, making it inoperable. Despite multiple surgeries and radiation treatments, her body continued to grow. Tanya's case was considered one of the most severe ever documented. She passed away in 2013 at the age of 34, leaving behind a legacy of advocacy and awareness for those who were living with rare disorders. Giganticism is exceedingly rare. Fewer than 100 cases have been documented in the United States to date. It typically begins in childhood, when growth plates are still open, allowing excessive linear growth. The condition is almost always caused by benign tumors of the pituitary gland. If untreated, it can lead to severe complications, including cardiovascular strain, joint deterioration, and eventually mortality. Yet despite its dangers, society has long been captivated by those who tower above the rest. From ancient myths to modern media, the fascination persists. There is also a darker side to this obsession: gigantophobia. The fear or discomfort around extremely tall individuals has been documented in psychological literature. It often stems from feelings of vulnerability or unease when confronted with disproportionate size. In some cases, it manifests in social exclusion or ridicule. The same traits that inspire awe can also provoke fear. Revisiting the tomb that archaeologists unearthed just north of Rome, it was unusually large, over 8 feet, and inside was the complete skeleton of a young man who had lived during the 13th century AD. His bones told a story that had never been fully captured in antiquity, a case of pituitary giganticism. He was estimated to be around 202 centimeters tall, or nearly 6 foot 8 inches, towering over his Roman contemporaries, whose average height hovered around 5 foot 6. Yet his proportions were strikingly normal. The long bones of his limbs were over 5 standard deviations above the rest of the population mean, and some had not yet fused, suggesting that he was still growing when he died between the age of 16 and 20. The skull revealed subtle damage, signs of a pituitary tumor from pressing within. This tumor would have triggered an overproduction of growth hormone, a rare condition even today, affecting only about 3 in a million people. His burial was simple, without artifacts or signs of speculation, suggesting that he was treated not as a curiosity, but as a member of his community. His skeleton, catalogued as T.30, remains the earliest complete example of giganticism ever found in archaeological records. Although his name is unknown, the remains provide evidence of a body that was unusual for its era, a life that extended beyond typical expectations, and a mystery that remained undiscovered beneath Roman soil for centuries. In the early 18th century, King Frederick William I of Persia, known as the Soldier King, embarked on one of the most bizarre military experiments in European history. Obsessed with height despite standing only about 5 foot 5 inches himself, Frederick created a regime composed entirely of exceptionally tall men. Officially named the Grand Grandiers of Postum, they were more commonly known as the Postum Giants, or Longfellows.
Frederick's fascination with tall soldiers went far beyond his aesthetics. He believed their stature would intimidate enemies and oppress glowing dignitaries. The regime became a symbol of Persian prestige, paraded for ceremonial purposes rather than deployed in combat. Uniforms were tailored to exaggerate their height, including tall leather caps and elongated blue coats. Pay was determined by height alone. The taller a soldier, the higher the salary.
Recruitment methods were often strong-arm. Agents scoured Europe for tall men, offering bribes or resorting to outright kidnapping. One of the tallest recruits, an Irishman named James Kirkland, stood over 7 feet tall and was tricked into boarding a Parisian ship before being forcibly enlisted. Teachers, landowners, and even foreign monarchs participated in the hunt for height, sending tall individuals as diplomatic gifts. Babies born to tall parents were marked with red scarves for future enlistment. Frederick's obsession eventually veered into verging eugenics. He paired tall soldiers with tall women in hopes of breeding a future generation of giants. Charles Darwin later referenced this in The Descent of Man, noting it as one of the only known cases of intentional human selective breeding. Nor have certain male and female individuals been intentionally picked out and matched, except in the well-known case of the Peruvian grenadiers. The king eventually experimented in stretching soldiers on rocks to increase their height, a cruel practice that led to injuries and even deaths before it was abandoned. Despite their elite status, the post-dem giants were never sent into battle. Frederick considered them too valuable and fragile for warfare. Their role remained ceremonial, often summoned to cheer up the king during bouts of melancholia. He painted their portraits from memory and had them march through his bedroom when ill. When Frederick William I died in 1740, the regiment numbered over 3,000 men. His son, Frederick the Great, had little interest in maintaining the spectacle. He viewed the giants as impractical and gradually reassigned them to active units. The regiment was officially disbanded in 1806, following the Parisians' defeat by Napoleon. Throughout countless centuries, whispers of giants echo in mythology, oral tradition, and even some controversial archaeological claims. From the biblical Nephilim to the towering figures found in North America lore, these beings are often painted as descendants of divine or otherworldly ancestors. But what if these tales stem from more than just metaphor? What if they are fragments of a deeper cosmic history? According to controversial interpretations of Zecharia Sitchin, the giant bloodline connects to an ancient race of extraterrestrials, the Anunnaki. Sitchin believed that these beings hailed from a distant planet called Nibiru, a mysterious member of our solar system. To that roughly 450,000 years ago, the Anunnaki arrived on Earth seeking gold, a crucial element for stabilizing their planet's atmosphere. Facing grueling mining demands, they allegedly engineered a new species, us, by blending their DNA with early humanoids. One of the key figures in this tale is Enoch, a Sumerian god reimagined by Sitchin as a scientist and genetic pioneer. His role, according to this theory, wasn't just about creating Homo sapiens. It was about establishing dominion. The Anunnaki, said to be towering in stature and intellect, appointed human intermediaries, kings and priests, to maintain control and pass down knowledge, birthing the concept of divine right. The connection to giantism deepens with these Enochian creations allegedly appeared larger and stronger than ordinary humans, echoing stories of gods walking among mortals and of sky beings who bred with humankind. These hybrid beings were possibly the Nephilim mentioned in Genesis, standing as symbols of divine power but also disruption. The tale turns cosmological with Sitchin's interpretation of Enuma Elish, an ancient Babylonian creation myth. He argues that the celestial event, a violent collision between Nubia and a primordial planet named Tema, formed Earth and the asteroid belt. This cosmic drama, encoded in poetic myth, adds fuel to the belief that humanity's origin story could be far more interstellar than we've been led to believe. Of course, mainstream archaeology and astronomy push back hard. Scholars argue that Sitchin's translations are flawed, and astronomers deny Nibiru's existence, citing a lack of evidence of problematic orbital mechanics. Still, the theory persists, intertwined with pop culture, conspiracy circles, and the ever-growing fascination with ancient astronauts. While Nibiru has yet to emerge from behind the cosmic veil, science keeps searching. Hypothetically, Planet 9 has entered the conversation, a cold, dark world that may lurk on the outer solar system. It is not tied to myths or gods, but it is elusive nature that invites speculation. Could ancient stories be memories of something more? As we trace the footprints left behind by myths and tablets, stories like those of the Anunnaki, the Nephilim, and the giants remind us of our incredible power of narration. They challenge us to think beyond accepted truths, yet caution us with the weight of skepticism. Whether these beings were real or simply reflection of humanity's hunger for grandeur, they serve a deeper purpose, helping us to understand ourselves, our origins, ambitions, and the timeless need to belong to something bigger. Belief and skepticism are twin forces. One fuels the imagination, the other keeps our feet on solid ground. And somewhere in between, stories thrive, passed down through clay tablets, folklore, and cosmic speculation. Why do we want giants to be real? Is it awe? Is it fear? Or is it the hope that the universe is far more mysterious and magical than we dare admit? And with that, I am Amanda Joy, reminding you to take with you the mysteries of the universe and the echoes of our shared past, and let the footsteps of giants guide your way wherever it leads. Until next time, keep listening and keep wondering.